Think she even knows what the hell we're saying? Owen didn't bother whispering. His smirk stretched across the table like a challenge. Victor let out a chuckle and said, "Probably not. But hey, if someone's handing over $1 billion for a quiet sushi doll, I'm signing that deal yesterday." That's how it began. An $800 million private dinner perched atop one of San Francisco's most exclusive rooftop restaurants, where glass walls offered sweeping views of the bay. It should have been a landmark partnership. Instead, it cracked open something uglier, an undercurrent of tension stitched together by glances, silence, and prejudice. At the head of the table sat Aiko Tanaka, a tech billionaire from Japan who built her empire from the ground up. Her silence wasn't passive, it was a calculated shield. She chose not to speak English that evening. Not because she couldn't, because she wouldn't. That was her armor. And in the shadows of that glittering room moved Leila Carter, a young black waitress with a dancer's posture, sharp almond eyes, and the kind of stillness that sees everything. She wasn't just pouring wine. She was collecting every word, every gesture, every slight wrapped in a smile. She heard the snide comments, the sharp finger snaps, the racial undertones painted as jokes. She watched them reduce Aiko to a silent foreign obstacle standing between them and another conquest. But what happened next? That wasn't just a business flip. It was a revolution, and it came disguised as service. Because this isn't just a tale of backroom deals and corporate bravado. It's a black story, a story of the overlooked, the underestimated, and the sheer power of women who know exactly when to speak. And when Leila did speak, she didn't just translate. She detonated the room. So before we walk you through that night, the deals, the deception, the dignity, make sure you're subscribed. We bring stories like this every week. Stories that prove sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones rewriting the ending. Stick around. This one's going to shift you. The restaurant was called the Palisade. Sitting atop a gleaming tower in downtown San Francisco, it wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement piece. The chandeliers didn't hang. They cascaded, frozen waterfalls of light. The floors were slick marble, glowing under soft amber lights. And the view? A 360-degree panorama of a city built on audacity. Inside the reserved private room, exclusivity hung heavy in the air. Dark mahogany walls, a sweeping walnut table polished to a mirror finish, and a haze of roasted duck, truffle oil, and aged bourbon set the tone. At one end, Victor Harlan, CEO of Valancer Biotech, sat like royalty. He was tall, broad, and wore a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than your rent. His blonde hair was slicked back, and his smile was weaponized. Next to him, Owen Mercer, the CFO, was the younger, sharper blade. His darker suit screamed money. His watch glinted under the candlelight like a flex. If Victor was the strategist, Owen was the enforcer. Together, they walked in like apex predators, confident, aggressive, and sure of their inevitable win. Across from them was Aiko Tanaka, their supposed acquisition target, except she didn't play the part. Founder of Hoshiko AI, the Tokyo-based pioneer in surgical robotics and neural tech, Aiko wasn't anyone's conquest. Her silver hair was pinned with precision, her indigo silk dress flowed like moonlight, and she wore no makeup, no jewelry, just presence. Quiet, grounded, impossibly unreadable. She said nothing. Her aide, seated behind her, occasionally offered soft translations. But mostly, Aiko just listened. Her stillness unsettled them. And then there was Leila, the waitress, invisible in a room full of men who thought they saw everything. Moving quietly, topping off glasses, clearing plates. Her name wasn't on any agenda, but her awareness? Piercing. She caught Victor's polished arrogance, Owen's tapping knee, and Aiko's unwavering calm in a room designed to unnerve her. This wasn't just a fancy dinner. It was a silent test, and no one knew who was really being evaluated. The first toast was strained. Victor raised his glass, bourbon glinting under candlelight. To global partnerships, he said with polished bravado. and to a future where science knows no borders. He smiled like he expected applause. Aiko raised her glass with a polite nod. No words. No translation. Owen leaned in. Was that a yes? Or just her version of get lost? He whispered, not quietly enough. Aiko responded in Japanese, her voice low and composed. Her aide translated. Ms. Tanaka appreciates the sentiment. That was it. And so the pattern continued. Victor launched into well-rehearsed monologues about synergy, scalability, market dominance. He gestured. He smiled. He sold. Aiko responded with single, measured sentences. Her aide translated. Always brief, always neutral. Owen's patience wore thin. He leaned toward Victor and muttered. We negotiating with a statue now? This is ridiculous. Victor kept his PR smile. It's cultural. She's playing the game. Just hold steady. But Owen didn't do steady. He snapped his fingers at Leila without even glancing at her. Hey, sweetheart, more of that, Sarah. We're gonna need it. Leila felt the sting. It wasn't the request, it was the tone. The entitlement tucked inside sweetheart, like a leash disguised as charm. She poured the wine without a single word, hands steady, eyes alert. Leila didn't need to speak. She was absorbing everything. Later in the evening, Owen leaned back with an exaggerated sigh, rolling his eyes as Aiko's aide translated another brief, composed response. You know, he said loudly, we could probably swap her out for a chatbot and get more feedback. Victor chuckled at that. Leila caught the expression flicker across Aiko's face. It was slight, a wound felt and hidden in the same breath. Her calm never wavered, but her eyes betrayed a quiet cut. They weren't speaking to her. They were talking around her, over her, like she was a delay in their timeline rather than the architect of the technology they were so eager to buy. They saw a language barrier, but missed what that barrier revealed about them. To them, Aiko was a challenge to overcome, a number to convert, a signature waiting to be pinned down. But to Leila, she looked like something else, something familiar, a reflection, and Leila could feel the air shifting. The room wasn't just losing warmth, it was starting to crack. Leila Carter had been trained to disappear. Not explicitly, no one sat her down and said it. But she learned it all the same. From classrooms where she was the only black girl and everyone turned when urban came up. From retail stores where the security guard knew her name before the cashier did. From interviews where they smiled, nodded, and never called. In this restaurant, invisibility wasn't accidental. It was standard. Seamless service. Move quietly. Eyes down. Speak only when invited. Make guests feel important, but never become visible yourself. But Leila hadn't always lived in shadows. She remembered a different life. Kyoto. The quiet clatter of sandals on temple stones. Long summer days chasing cicadas through narrow alleys. Folding paper cranes in hushed classrooms where no one questioned her skin or made her explain it. Her mother, a diplomat, had been stationed in Japan for nearly 10 years. Leila had learned Japanese before she learned sarcasm, before she learned what it meant to be too much in a room designed for someone else, before she learned to brace for being misunderstood. That language stayed with her, not just the vocabulary, but the rhythm of it, the intention behind every bow, the weight behind each respectful phrase. It shaped her before anything else did. But when they moved back to the States, she learned something else. That fluency in Japanese was only impressive when it came from the lips of someone who looked different from her. That her intelligence needed to be translated too, because it wasn't automatically believed. Now, at 24, Leila was juggling shifts, tuition, and quiet ambition. 2 jobs funded her fine arts degree in Oakland. She painted after midnight, sketched on BART rides, served wine with the grace of someone who knew her own value, even if no one else in the room did. But tonight, as she watched Aiko endure polished dismissals and polite slights, something lit up inside her. Aiko wasn't just a wealthy woman at a negotiation table. She was a woman being dismissed because she didn't conform to the room's expectation of power. And Leila knew that fight. She'd lived that silence, worn it like a uniform. But that silence, it was starting to fray. The conversation had begun to collapse under its own weight. Victor leaned back, fingers tapping the table, waiting like he expected the room to revolve around him. Aiko stayed composed, every response precise, filtered through her aid. Her restraint, once mistaken for diplomacy, now seemed to unsettle the men across from her. And then Owen had enough. With a theatrical sigh, he flung his napkin on the table and leaned forward, his grin full of smug impatience. "We want to buy your company," he said, over-enunciating like he was speaking to a child. "Do you understand?" Victor laughed, not because it was funny, but because control felt close. "Maybe we should bust out some flashcards," he added, his tone soaked in mockery. Leila almost dropped the carafe. Standing at the service station, pretending to read the wine list, her back was turned, but her whole body tensed. Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter. It wasn't just the ignorance. It was the assumption that not speaking like them meant someone was somehow lesser. Aiko blinked slowly. She didn't react, but the air in the room grew denser, heavier. Owen leaned back again, proud of himself. "I mean seriously," he muttered to Victor, unaware that Leila stood just 5 feet behind him. "This is like negotiating with a bonsai tree." Victor chuckled. "Silent. Decorative. Probably older than it looks." Leila turned, her heart hammering, not from fear, but from fury. She looked toward Aiko, still motionless, still composed. But Leila saw it, that tiny shift in her jaw, the quiet defiance behind her eyes. Then came the whisper, a hand on Leila's shoulder. "Her manager." "Don't get involved," Grady murmured. "You speak only when spoken to. Just do your job." Leila nodded, but something inside her had already snapped free. Aiko spoke again, a soft sentence in Japanese. Her aide didn't translate. It wasn't meant for the men at the table. It was more like a thought whispered into the room. "Is there no one here who truly sees me?" Leila heard it, and that was the moment she realized. This wasn't cluelessness. It wasn't cultural confusion. It was systemic. It was intentional. And she wouldn't, stay quiet any longer. The room settled into a strange hush. Owen reclined smugly, still riding high on his bonsai quip. Victor topped off his bourbon, confident the deal was already his. Aiko hadn't moved. Her aide remained silent. But then, she spoke again. Another line. Soft. Sharp. Not for show. Not for translation. And Leila? She was already moving. Her voice wasn't aimed at anyone in particular. It was cast into the space like a stone into a canyon, searching for an echo, a response, anything that might reflect back. Leila heard every word. "Watashi o hanto and I mirimase ka? Is there truly anyone here who sees me?" The syllables struck Leila like a chord, deep and resonant, vibrating in her chest. It wasn't just the words, it was the ache behind them. That kind of sadness didn't come from fragility. It came from being made invisible in plain sight. Leila stepped back from the wall, her breath catching. Her hands trembled briefly, the weight of protocol tightening around her like a vice. Grady's warning still echoed in her ears, "Don't get involved." But Aiko's whisper shattered every rule Leila had ever followed. She moved. The sound of her heels tapping across the hardwood floor cut through the heavy silence, like a metronome. Victor looked up, annoyed. Owen frowned, confused. Her manager went rigid, unsure whether to stop her or simply pretend she wasn't there. Leila didn't hesitate. She walked straight to Aiko's side and bowed. Not the shallow, performative dip expected of service staff, but a deep, reverent bow. The kind reserved for mentors. For those whose presence commanded respect beyond language. She rose slowly and met Aiko's gaze. Then, in crisp, fluent Japanese, Leila spoke. "Tanaka-sama, I sincerely apologize. I know I'm not supposed to speak, but silence in the face of this kind of disrespect, that silence becomes complicity. If you'll permit me, I'd like to help." The room froze. Victor's glass clinked against the table. Owen's jaw hung open. Even the aide stared, blinking as if unsure what reality he'd just slipped into. Aiko's eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. like a lighthouse blinking through fog after days lost at sea. She reached out and touched Leila's arm gently. In Japanese, her voice barely above a whisper, "Arigato. Watashi omatit karita." Thank you for seeing me. And in that moment, the dynamic in the room shifted, subtly, decisively. Leila hadn't just spoken. She had taken control. Aiko leaned back in her chair for the first time all evening, eyes fixed on Leila. With a small nod, she passed the torch, not just permission, but trust. Leila stepped forward. Her voice was steady now, clear and controlled. "Ms. Tanaka has asked that I interpret for her moving forward," Leila said, looking directly at Victor and Owen. "She believes it's time her words are heard in full." Owen let out a shaky laugh. "Sure," he said. "Let's hear it then." Leila turned, speaking briefly with Aiko in Japanese, measured, respectful. Then she faced the men again, spine straight, voice unwavering. "She'd like to begin by reviewing the revised contract you brought tonight." Victor retrieved a leather folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "It's all there," he said smoothly. "Clean terms. Straightforward. Very generous." Leila opened the folder, flipping through the pages. Her pulse quickened, not from nerves, but focus. She wasn't a lawyer, but she'd spent countless nights helping her mother, once a U.N. attaché, proofread policy drafts and diplomatic agreements. She knew what traps looked like when dressed in legalese. Page after page flipped, until her eyes stopped on Section 7B. "This clause," Leila said slowly, "grants Valencer the authority to renegotiate all intellectual property licenses after the merger. That includes the AI systems personally designed by Ms. Tanaka." Victor blinked. "That's boilerplate," he said. "Standard merger language." Leila shook her head. "It's not standard. It's vague on purpose. It would allow you to sell her patents, strip the core of her innovation, without asking her permission." Owen waved a hand. "It's just a safeguard in case the landscape shifts after acquisition." Leila didn't even look at him. She turned another page. "Section 12, she said, her tone sharpening. "This is a non-compete clause. But it's so broad, it wouldn't just stop Ms. Tanaka from launching another tech firm. It would prevent her from consulting, from speaking, even from teaching, for a full decade." She looked them both dead in the eye. "You're not just buying her company. You're trying to erase her from the industry." Silence dropped like a curtain. Victor's jaw tensed. Owen muttered something under his breath. Their confidence, their smug command of the room, was unraveling, thread by thread. Aiko still hadn't spoken, but her face now carried the quiet certainty of someone watching checkmate unfold, one slow move at a time. Leila had read the contract like a blueprint. Now the trap lay wide open, exposed. Owen toyed with his pen. Victor glanced out the window, as if the shimmering city skyline might offer a way out. But the moment had passed. There was no escaping it. Leila closed the folder gently. Her hands didn't shake. Her gaze didn't drop. And then Aiko spoke, this time aloud. Her voice was soft, but there was iron beneath the velvet. She turned to her aide and gave a single instruction. The man nodded silently, reached into his blazer, and retrieved a sleek silver device. No larger than a phone. He placed it on the table, pressed play. Static at first. Then, Victor's voice, unmistakable. "Let's just get to the final offer. Cut the incentives. We'll absorb her execs. She'll never know." Owen's laugh followed, full of teeth. "She's lost in her little tech bubble. We feed her lines through the translator. Let him do the heavy lifting." The recording echoed through the luxurious space, bouncing off polished walnut and glass. Clear. Damning. Leila didn't blink. She translated the gist for effect, though the meaning was already plain. They assumed she didn't understand. They laughed about distorting the terms. They joked about dismantling her team, about rewriting her legacy while she watched. Owen shot up from his chair, face flushed. "You can't record private meetings without consent. That's illegal," Owen barked, voice sharp with panic. Leila turned to him, calm and unshaken. "So is fraud." Victor didn't move, but his face had lost all color. For the first time all evening, he truly looked at Aiko, not as a figurehead, not as an obstacle, but as a force. She wasn't silent. She wasn't small. She was a fortress. And now, that fortress had returned fire. Aiko didn't smile. She didn't need to. The recording clicked off with a final metallic note, echoing through the room like a gavel. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a verdict. Leila clasped her hands in front of her. Her voice, low but steady, carried the weight of every woman who had ever been dismissed. You didn't just underestimate a woman. You underestimated the wrong woman. And you forgot, silence doesn't mean surrender. This wasn't a deal anymore. This was a reckoning. And Aiko Tanaka had just claimed the first win. The door slammed open. Leila barely turned before Grady stormed in, face flushed with rage. Usually measured, cold even, he was now visibly trembling. A man unraveling. What the hell was that? He snapped, storming past the stunned executives. He didn't even glance at Aiko. His voice dropped into a venomous hiss. You left your station. You inserted yourself into a private negotiation. You spoke to a guest. Leila stood tall. Still, she didn't defend herself. She didn't flinch. You're done, Grady spat. Finished. I don't care what the excuse is. You're fired. Effective immediately. From across the room, Owen scoffed. Finally, something this place gets right. Leila's jaw tightened. Her hands stayed at her sides, but the fire inside her rose. Not regret, resolve. She'd done the right thing. She knew it. And this was the price. Pack your things, Grady sneered. Security will walk you out. Leila inhaled, about to speak, uncertain of the words, but unwilling to leave in silence. She didn't have to. Actually, said a deep voice from the doorway. She's not going anywhere. Every head turned. A tall, impeccably dressed black man stood just inside the door. Early 40s, composed, his navy suit understated but flawless. His presence didn't shout, it commanded. Elias Monroe, he said, stepping forward. Executive Director of the North American Innovation Alliance. And a principal investor in Hoshiko's U.S. expansion. Grady blinked as if slapped. Victor paled even further. I've been sitting in the dining room for the last 20 minutes, Elias continued. Listening, watching, hearing that recording, observing your behavior. His eyes narrowed on Grady. You're not firing Leila Carter tonight. In fact, she deserves a formal apology. Grady opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Elias turned to Leila. And for the first time that night, she felt truly seen. Not as background, not as service, but as someone who mattered. You were the only one in this room who acted with integrity. Leila's throat tightened. Her eyes burned. The ground beneath her had shifted again, not because of title or money, but because someone used their power to amplify hers. The room was quiet now, still charged, but no longer tense. Grady stood in place, stiff with humiliation. Victor and Owen sat defeated, their dominance stripped bare. And Leila stood in the center of it all, apron still tied, posture unchanged. But everything about her had transformed. She wasn't just a server. She was the woman who stopped a multi-million-dollar betrayal with her voice. Aiko turned toward her, expression softened. In elegant Japanese, she spoke gently, and Leila listened. With each syllable, her breath caught, her entire being drawn toward this unexpected, surreal moment. Leila turned to Elias, then translated softly. She nodded. Ms. Tanaka has a request, Elias said. She would like to offer you a position with Hoshiko's global strategy team, not just as a cultural liaison, but as an executive aide, someone who understands nuance, who listens between the lines. Leila blinked. The words didn't register at first. You'd be based here in San Francisco, Elias continued. You'd help lead U.S. operations, advise on international partnerships, and oversee diversity strategy. He paused. Your tuition, covered. Any graduate program, anywhere in the world. Fully funded. Housing provided. Starting salary reflective of what you've already proven tonight. Leila's breath caught. The floor beneath her felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else. This couldn't be happening. Aiko stood, crossed the space between them, and took Leila's hands in her own. "You saw me," she said softly, in accented but perfect English, "when no one else did." Leila's voice broke. "I'd be honored," she whispered. "Truly." Aiko smiled. "Then come. We have work to do. Real work." And just like that, the door Leila had spent her life walking around blew wide open. She stepped through, and the fallout? It came fast. Within 48 hours, word of the failed deal leaked. Not from Aiko, not from Leila, but from the back channels of the tech world, where secrets don't stay buried long. The recording? Quietly shared with legal counsel and key industry players. It hit Valancer like a shockwave. Victor Harlan was summoned to a boardroom behind closed doors. The meeting didn't last an hour. He was forced to resign, without his golden parachute. His empire collapsed in silence. By noon the next day, Victor's name vanished from the company's website. Just 2 days later, Owen Mercer stepped down, officially for personal reasons, but no one believed that. The truth was obvious. Investors panicked. Shareholders demanded accountability. And the media? They had a field day. The narrative needed no embellishment. Two powerful white executives caught on tape attempting to erase the legacy of a foreign female founder, only to be exposed by a black waitress who dared to tell the truth. The headlines wrote themselves. From server to savior. The woman who stopped an $800 million power grab. Poetic justice served at a rooftop restaurant. Online, the story exploded. Comment sections overflowed with praise. For Leila Carter, for Aiko Tanaka, for the simple, radical act of refusing to stay silent when it counted most. As for Victor and Owen, their reputations collapsed. Invitations dried up. Conference gigs were canceled. Partnerships dissolved without explanation. The doors that once opened at their mere presence now stayed locked. They had underestimated one woman's silence and another's voice. And in doing so, they reminded the world of something it often forgets. Real power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears an apron. And sometimes the people you overlook are the ones rewriting the rules. This wasn't just a business story. It wasn't just a shocking boardroom twist. It was a story about visibility, about dignity, about what happens when the world mistakes silence for weakness, and when it reduces people to uniforms, accents, or assumptions. Leila Carter was never just a waitress. She was a young woman shaped by global experience, fluent in cultures, and rich in quiet strength that most people never even noticed. She paid attention when others didn't. She listened to what others ignored. And when her moment came, she chose courage over comfort. And Aiko Tanaka? Yes, she was a billionaire. But that night, she was something far more vulnerable. A woman being sidelined, talked over, reduced to a stereotype in her own story. Her strength didn't come from money. It came from discipline, from patience, from knowing the right deal only matters when it's made with the right people. Both women entered a room designed to shrink them. Instead, they transformed it. Here's the truth. Most people don't really see what's in front of them. They see titles, skin tones, name tags, and then they decide who matters and who doesn't. But the world begins to change the moment someone chooses to listen. So let this be your reminder. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never dismiss the person clearing your table, answering your call, or sitting silently at the far end of a conference room. You don't know what they know. You don't know what they carry. And if you are one of those quiet ones, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or uninvited, let this be your reminder. You matter. Your voice matters. And one day, when it matters most, the world will hear you. This was a black story, but more than that, it was a human story. If this moment moved you, if it reminded you of someone who once stood up for you, or someone you failed to see, share it. Let it ripple. Let someone else hear it. Let it be more than a story. Let it be a shift. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.